Welcome back. I hope everybody had a good lunch and had some good breakout sessions. If we could get everybody seated, we need to get rolling here. If you could silence your cell phones, we heard some cell phones going off in the earlier session, so that'd be super helpful if you could do that. And now what I want to do is I want to introduce our next guest. There's something so interesting. This happens at every summit. We have these incredible guest speakers that come in. And when I go to read the bios, one of the things I realize about most of them, not all of them, but most of them are people that I've known for a long time, a lot of times people you've known for a long time, and they're not just guest speakers for us. They're actually friends. They're personal friends of mine or some of us on staff, but they're definitely friends of the organization. There's a difference between paying some high-powered speaker to come in and say a few nice words about Convention of States and to chat with y'all, or somebody who's really committed. And so our next speaker is Kevin Roberts. And you guys know Kevin Roberts as the president of Heritage. He's done an incredible job there, right? Completely transformed that organization, in my opinion. I first knew Kevin Roberts as the president of Texas Public Policy Foundation, and I watched him do the same thing there. And we had an intimate look in Texas because I was in Texas, I lived in Texas, my daughter worked at Texas Public Policy Foundation. What that meant is, we often see leadership from the outside, and you can sort of see the veneer, and you can see the results, and you see the person on stage. But I've had a chance to work with Kevin. I've had a chance to watch my daughter work under his leadership and tutelage, and I will tell you, he's a rare breed of leader. And he would fit perfectly in this organization because Kevin is a true servant leader. One of the worst things to happen to Texas was when Kevin Roberts decided to go be at Heritage because we lost Kevin in Texas. But I knew it would be a great gain for the nation. And I honestly, as much as I love Kevin and I loved his work at TPPF, I had no idea what an incredible job he would do at Heritage. And I really think he's transformed the place. He previously served, as I said, as CEO of Texas Public Policy, which was our first institutional endorser, so incredible. He is currently continuing to be a proud endorser and supporter of Convention of States. He is one of the primary champions, I think, in the United States of America and Washington, D.C. for limited government. It's an honor and a privilege to introduce my friend, Kevin Roberts. Go do it.
Thank you all so much. It's a real pleasure to be here. How about a round of applause for one of the great leaders in America, Mark Meckler? Last night, my wife said, why are you going to Indianapolis? I said, I'm going to Indianapolis to be with my people. Yeah. And do you know what she said? She said, Convention of States, Mark Meckler? I said, bingo, Mrs. Roberts. She knows. Why are you my people? Because I can look out here, yeah, because you're right, a lot of you are Texans, that's awesome. But even those of you who aren't, I love, and I think you might love me once in a while, because you know what time it is. And you have for many years. And going back to Mark's generous, very generous introduction of me, it was Mark Meckler and Convention of States which convinced me as I was making the move from being a full-time academic to being a policy leader, that there actually was hope within the American system using political activism and the founding of our country to fix our problem. And that's what you have been doing, and I just want to thank you for that. And I knew that. I used to teach the Constitution when I was a professor. Now, keep in mind, I'm a recovering academic, so you can trust me. I'm gonna talk about institutional reform here in a little bit. I knew it in my brain, but it's a very different thing to practice it, to believe it in our hearts. And it is such a privilege for me now, as president of what I think is the largest policy organization in the world, to be a full-throated endorser of your work. And I want you to know Heritage and Heritage Action stand shoulder to shoulder with you. Anything you need, anytime, the answer is yes. Let's go take back this country. But I also come to you like you are, filled with sorrow and anger about what happened to our friend, Charlie Kirk, 9 days ago. And when the sorrow subsides, which it does occasionally, anger fills it. Not violent anger. That's not us. Evidenced by your project. Totally peaceful, constitutional, legal reform. But righteous anger, which is that enough is enough. And when will we as a people recognize, especially that in the 9 days since, when we have members of the media and professors and university presidents and members of Congress who celebrate the ghoulish assassination of America's best young leader and future president. Right. And so when I was asked by Mark and his colleagues to talk about systemic reforms of institutions using Convention of States, I mean, that's a big enough task already. But then you pair that with the news that we're dealing with now, and you realize we have a lot of work to do. And so what I want to convey to you is that Convention of States is, of course, just on its face, the structural reform that will put Washington back into its right parameters of power. But Convention of States is also, by the very nature of the process of getting more and more states to debate it, to discuss it, something that has already been important for galvanizing common sense Americans around a good idea. And I want to encourage you that there are many ways to honor Charlie Kirk's legacy. The most important as it relates to Convention of States, after praying, to be sure, is to continue doing what you're doing. And if it's somehow possible for a group of several hundred activists to double down and do even more, now is the time to do it. There are more Americans who are listening to your message, who will be open to your message, because of the recognition that there is a group of Americans, it's larger than a sliver on the radical left, who not only hate what we stand for, a few of them are willing to go to, obviously, extreme ends to stop our work. Not all of them, to be sure. You don't preach violence. We at Heritage don't preach violence. But what we do preach is the truth, and we publicly shame people who continue to celebrate this nonsense. And so, to cut to the chase, Mark and I are going to have a little conversation here in a bit. It's time to build. It's time to pray. Pray even more if you have, as sometimes happens in our spiritual journey, slipped away from going to church or had your doubts. Get back to it. It's time to order our interior lives so that we can do even greater things with our public lives. The gentleman who follows me, I think, is the greatest statesman of our generation, Senator Rick Santorum. I mean that, and I've meant it since my little kids and I were campaigning for him when he ran for president in his first election. And he did so well, I will observe, in the Louisiana primary. But it makes sense that a man of faith, just like all of you, people who understand truth and goodness and beauty, would endorse this project. But we also have to understand that the institutions that craft our understanding, our belief, whether in the American dream or in God or how we practice our faith, have deteriorated. Some of them actually have become part of the metastasized cancer that has started with these transgender extremist violent networks that caused Charlie's death. And so part of building and building institutions is rebuilding institutions that have decayed. K-12 schools, universities, Rotary clubs, bowling leagues, Little League baseball, what used to be called the Boy Scouts. Keep in mind, as I mentioned, every single one of those, where your mind went. It went immediately to how in each of those categories of institutions, they've been politicized. Totally politicized. And look, even though you knew better, and you do know better, and you've no doubt done a great job of bringing people into the fight, think of how many well-intentioned, generally conservative Americans thought that it wasn't a problem. So, as a lifelong educator, I say the first place we must build is K-12 schools. This is all about education. And I celebrate the Trump administration and the education secretary and her team for being very genuine and honest about commencing what will be the greatest reform in the history of America, which is the end of the U.S. Department of Education. I'm also proud to say that Heritage has been calling for its dismantling since literally the day it was signed into law by Jimmy Carter. The second thing, though, second area where we need to build is colleges and universities. I mean, just think about where you went to college, or your kids went to college, or are in college, or your grandkids were or are. They might be okay places in some respects, but I can tell you, as someone who fought within that system as the lone conservative Christian history professor at a large university in the Southwest, that it's 3 times as bad as you think. At least 3 times. And I'm an optimist, so it's probably worse than that. You need evidence? I mean, think about the goofballs who go to Charlie Kirk memorials and protest those. Or think about the true anti-Semites, not just among the students, but among the tenured professors, and the cowards called presidents of universities who don't fire them and shroud themselves under this BS of tenure and academic freedom. We have to build new colleges and universities. Now, that's not the exact project of Convention of States. I know that. You got a tall order. I'm not trying to put additional pressure on you. I'm trying to encourage you that there are Americans working shoulder to shoulder with you, either on your project itself and or in these other channels. And it's really good to see that there are more universities, more colleges, who at least are moving from the radical left being accepted to shifting the gear into neutral as it relates to ideology on campus, philosophy, and so on. And look, I can tell you, as someone who's been in a classroom, I didn't teach early American history through the lens of a conservative Christian professor. I can tell you my colleagues on the left taught it through their lens using that stupid book, Howard Zinn's People's History of the United States. I just wanted students to do what? To know the facts. And then use their own brains, hopefully with some revitalized patriotism by virtue of studying America, warts and all, and realize this is the last best hope for self-governance in the world. We have to build institutions that reflect the citizenry we want. And isn't it an irony, a tragedy, that not only was that Charlie Kirk's life work when you think about it, but that is precisely what he was doing the moment he died. Comforting, as his wife told us a week ago, that because that was his last act, that we can rest assured, those of us with faith, that for all of eternity, that's what Charlie Kirk is going to have as his legacy. We must honor that and honor the work of so many people whose names we don't know, who have been heroes in this, to continue to build these institutions. We need so many more colleges like the University of Austin, like Hillsdale College, like Grove City, like the one that I led, Wyoming Catholic College, all religious stripes, all denominations. It does not matter. We need more of them to secure the American future. How does Convention of States fit into that? Because you have shown, with the number of states who have passed your legislation and the fact that even though we have the good fortune of Donald Trump having a second term, that you're not going to give up the fight. That in fact, structurally, Convention of States is one of the ways, I have argued publicly, the key way we secure the promise of Trumpian conservatism. And that's why when I got to Heritage, which had been neutral on the issue of convention of states, with great respect, that I went to my colleagues and I said, look, the way Heritage operates is you're smart and I'm not. But I'm stubborn, more stubborn than you. It's not exactly how it went. It was totally collegial, but I said, what it really was, maybe a little bit of stubbornness. I said, would you just do me a favor and research it? Just look at it again. And honestly, all kidding aside, no pressure. Give me your honest assessment privately. And what I was expecting, as Mark Meckler and Rick Santorum knew, was they'd come back to me and say, there's no way we can do this. And then I was going to have to sit there, pray for inspiration, figure out how we skin this cat a little bit different way. And we would have done so collegially. Heritage is a beautiful place to work. My colleagues are wonderful, as evidenced by what I'm about to tell you. And they came back to me and they said, well, this is better than we thought. And I resisted my rather male temptation to say, I told you so. It's actually a female temptation, but I was trying to be nice. That's for you guys. I'm in trouble when I get home with Mrs. Roberts. She's going to say, you should have stayed at Convention of States. Yeah, all right. We got to have fun, right? They said, we realize this has always been needed and it's needed now, and we would like to go to the simulation and see it in person. And they did, and I can tell you, I love my colleagues so much. They are so smart, so great on policy. If you need anything, let us know on any subject. And they came back because they're intellectually honest people, and they're good people, and they're people who love this country, who also are learning how to fight. And they said, Kevin, that was one of the most inspiring things I've ever seen in my life. And I had no temptation at all at that point. In fact, the only thing I said was, thank you, and God bless you. And so Heritage's endorsement of your project isn't because of Kevin Roberts. It's because of them, because they're thinking people, like most Americans are, who understand the substance and understand that whatever their particular project is, whatever their institution that they're trying to reform is, K-12 schools, colleges, the Department of Justice, FBI, whatever it may be, that Convention of States is vital to that because it revitalizes federalism and it puts the federal government back in its proper box. So keep doing what you're doing. But I'm going to continue my list of categories of institutions we need to reform, just to give you a sense of how at Heritage we see our work pairing up with yours. The third is the media. It was very obvious this week. But I'll give you some hope there. Conservatives have access to a lot of media, more than when I was in college, president of the college Republicans at my university, trying to figure out, well, how can we get coverage for this great local candidate, for this certain office? It's easier now, and President Trump and Vice President Vance showed that last year, when you have the courage to go on to podcasts and alternative media and sit there with someone for 45 minutes or 3 hours and have a wide-ranging conversation, that this is what Americans are looking for. Because Americans, even though they're very busy in a lot of different ways, doing a lot of different things, ultimately value authenticity more than anything. And how could it be any more authentic than to sit there and have the courage of your convictions, if you're running for president or you're running for mayor, and talk to people who might disagree with you 50% of the time. It's not unlike the conversations you have when you go into legislators' offices, especially if you know that their voting and speaking record on Convention of States is maybe opposed to what we believe, and engage them in a conversation with authenticity, with substance. That's what we need to be doing in the media. And obviously we need some billionaire like Elon Musk to buy one of the big broadcast networks. I've been saying that for years. And I understand that maybe someone may soon. We're winning is the point in the area of media, even though there have been a few episodes this week that have been very concerning. Don't lose sight of the trajectory that we are on because of your work, because of the courage and heroism of Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, Charlie Kirk, and all of you. That leads me to a pessimistic point, though. At Heritage, I coach my colleagues to read reality truthfully. It's sort of like going to the doctor. You've got some problem. If you're going to solve that problem, either through medication or through some other kind of treatment, you first have to diagnose it. And the diagnosis that I'm here to give you is that while Washington is better in 2025 because the Republican Party controls both chambers of Congress and the presidency, that there are still far too many people who use that capital R Republican designation who aren't ready to fight. It's evident today in the Senate, a long-running problem Senator Santorum would tell you about. It's evident, unfortunately, outside of Washington and state capitals, where there are too many so-called conservatives who, when the chips are down, somehow have had their spines removed. I mean that not at all personally. At Heritage, we focus on policy and ideas, but we also focus on reality. Your job, which you've already accomplished to some extent, isn't just getting more states to confirm that they want to be part of a convention of states. It's to continue to inspire good men and women to replace those weaker Republicans so that in Washington we can finally solve this problem. And so even though it is a long-running sort of negative note, I want you to know that the trajectory is at least mildly better. There are good men and women there, to be sure. But since Charlie's death, in the media interviews I've done, I've just said, look, I'm tired of saying that you can compromise with the left. You can't. You got to defeat them in the ballot box. But I also have to tell you, working in Washington for 4 years now, you can't compromise with so-called conservatives who go on CNN or the Atlantic Conference and say that this is a both sides problem. To hell with that. And to close up here in a couple of minutes, my passion still is working at the state level. That's why Heritage has expanded its work so much into states. And I know after talking to Rita this afternoon, we'll be doing much more in partnership with all of you on an array of policies, following your lead, complementing your good work, using our policy scholars. But let me just be blunt. If you're going to be governor of a red state, remember it's a red state and act like it. And if you run a good campaign and you win in a purple state, God bless you, first of all. But how about remember, you were elected because a majority of people wanted your red state vision. How about have some courage and govern that way? And because I'm wound up, I will tell you about my new idea. I have thought for a long time, especially considering my adopted hometown is the very liberal city, Austin, Texas, that red states are doomed, or some of them are doomed politically, if we don't figure out as conservatives how to run competitive candidates in the blue cities of red states. And that means we've got to be savvy. I would not be able to be elected mayor of Austin, nor am I interested in that. But the point is that we have to be working, as we have announced we're doing at Heritage, on taking the 100 most populous cities in this country, only a few of whom have Republican mayors, and flipping at least 10 of them over the next 10 years, from blue to red. You're going to hear a lot about that from us, and we ask you to join us in that. We're in the process of finalizing the team, which of course at Heritage starts with a policy scholar, and then we pass off that work to our great colleagues at Heritage Action. And we have plenty of time over the months and years to be putting that plan together with friends like you. But what I wanted to leave you with is what we were already convicted of at Heritage just weeks prior to Charlie Kirk's death. And that was that as we do our various things for celebrating America's 250th anniversary, that maybe the role we play in the movement, in the country, is to cast a vision, not about America in 2026, and don't get me wrong, we need to celebrate America, but what America will look like at 500 in 2276. And we started talking about one thing, and that's the American family. And so just know that everything that Heritage does from this point forward, especially inspired by the legacy of our friend, Charlie Kirk, is going to be done through the lens of the question, does this help the American family? And if it doesn't, we will oppose it. If it does, we will support it. And I'll leave you with this charge from Charlie, one of his last comments actually, which we have put on a large banner that, as I have spoken here, we put on the side of the Heritage Building in Washington. A beautiful picture of Charlie and Erica and their children. Get married, he said. Have children. Build a legacy. Pass down your values. Pursue the eternal. Seek true joy. Do not discount, my friends, that you have already provided those things, those possibilities, those opportunities for your fellow Americans. And we will fight with you for Convention of States until you get across the finish line. God bless you.
Okay, so I had a whole bunch of questions, and now they're all out the window.
Oh man, I was trying to do that.
Oh, it was good. Okay, so one of the last things you said just kind of lit me up, which is going after these blue cities. Because I think sometimes, and I live just outside of Austin, we tend to just write them off. Hey, Austin's crazy, keep Austin weird, all that stuff. We don't have anybody on the city council. I don't think we have a conservative on the city council, right? So that's a tall order to go after it. I'm in a way, I want to understand how that squares with this idea of, we got to get rid of sort of the squishy Republicans, because it seems impossible to me that we're going to elect a rock-ribbed Republican in Austin proper. So why don't you explain that to me?
That's a great question. I'm glad you asked, because I'm sure a lot of people are thinking that. My point is that you should have a lot fewer squishy Republicans in Washington.
Yeah.
But you might have to tolerate a squishy Republican mayor of Austin.
Right.
And the example is the current mayor of Austin, Kirk Watson, who is a Democrat, was a longtime mayor of Austin, went into the state Senate. Kirk Watson's actually an upgrade from his predecessor, particularly on public safety. I'm not saying he's perfect, guys.
Yeah.
I'm not endorsing him to be president.
Right.
But I'm saying if Kirk Watson could win in the 2020s, although barely, then that tells us that maybe there's a chance. But I want to be clear that there are 10 better cities than Austin that are more gettable.
Right.
Harris County will be one of them, not Houston proper, but Harris County for the county judge race, I can tell you is one that will be on our list. So we have to recognize those are two different categories, but I would not put it past the American voter to say, I don't care that this guy or gal is more conservative than I am. If they're running to correct public safety, to get the books in order, and to have a transparent government, I don't care what label you use. I want to elect that person.
Yeah, I agree with that. Now, I think this is really important for you guys. I hear this all the time because I live in the grassroots across the country. I know you do too. And people are not that flexible. I mean, this is going to be an important lesson for us to learn. If you're trying to elect a mayor in a city that's a blue city, then we are going to have to compromise and say we're not going to get the hard right Republican. And I think also, and I'd love your comment on this, I think sometimes we make this mistake in Congress that, you've got a district, it's a swing district, maybe even leans a little bit blue, and then we go out and we nominate the most conservative person we can find because we like them a lot and we believe in them, and they're unelectable, and so we lose a seat we could potentially win.
That's right. And you think about places like New Hampshire, which is very likely going to be one of the 3 or 4 or 5 states in the midterms in 2028 where Heritage Action is very involved. We're working with candidates at Heritage Action or would-be candidates who wouldn't have a very high lifetime score at Heritage Action,
Right.
but this is New Hampshire.
Right.
And if we could find someone in Maine, that would be great. My point is, and you know that I like long-term thinking, is, or at least long-term strategy, is that if we could look at this over a 15 or 20-year process and see these as little building blocks toward having a real governing coalition in Washington, that we would be able to tolerate a squishy mayor of some northeastern town.
Right. All right. I love that. That's a really important lesson for us. I have one last question for you, which is really non-political, but you're sitting in front of a room of leaders, right? These people came in, they're willing to spend their money, their time, their treasure to come here because they're going to go home and lead their state teams. I've watched you lead over the years, now 2 major organizations. I didn't know you when you were leading the university. You're a servant leader. I don't think there are that many out there that lead large organizations, my experience. What's the secret to that? Like your people actually know that you care about them? I know, like my daughter worked for you guys, so I've seen it inside. How do you do that?
For me, I know for you, it starts with faith. And I'm going to be really practical and say, like first thing in the morning, talking to God, but more importantly, listening. And I'm reminded of a young colleague who worked with Charlie a few years ago, who's been saying the following prayer over and over: "Here I am, Lord, send me." That's what a servant leader does. And I'm imperfect, to be sure. The second thing is, sometimes people hear the phrase servant leader and they think that that's passive. It's actually really active. You personify this great balance. You do too. What I do as a servant leader is cast a vision, stay at the strategic. I learned from a mutual mentor of ours that the best thing a CEO can do is articulate the attributes in our organization's culture we honor and the attributes we dishonor. And then I trust my people, as I gave you the story, to make their decisions. If I disagree, I'll say so. But that's going to be among us, especially when it's tough. And then whatever they need, the intellectual ammunition and the tanks and the machine guns for the left, these are metaphors.
For now.
Serve them, because the greatest joy I have as a leader is watching my people succeed.
Yeah, and I've witnessed this in Kevin. So one of the reasons we're friends, this is a rare leader that you're witnessing, which is somebody who actually goes to work every day to serve his people. And you know, we talk about in our culture that we have an upside down corporate pyramid, right? And so I know how you look at it. Every day you go to the office, your responsibility is to take care of everybody else, right? You're the bottom. It's a weird inverted pyramid. But that structure, if you live that structure in your life, in your family, your job is to serve your whole family, right? And everything rests on that point. You all work together, but the father has to lead his family. If you do that in your own life, if you do it in your service at your church, if you do it at work, you will be a servant leader. And then you can grow up like I want to do and grow up to be like Kevin Roberts. So, Kevin, thank you for being with us today. God bless you for coming.
God bless you, brother. Thank you. Thank you.
I mean, to me, this is the most inspiring thing we get to do, is to hear from people like him. And by people like him, I don't mean because he leads Heritage. That's incredible. It's impressive, and the accomplishments are myriad. But I mean people who are really servant leaders. It's why I love what I do, because I get to travel around and meet with you guys. And I've said this before, I hate traveling. I hate being on the road. I don't like being away from my family. A lot of you guys know my wife, and she's amazing and as close to a perfect woman as I've ever met. She's taken, I'm just saying. You know, I have dogs at home that I love. You guys know the Great Danes, Winston and Doc, and I'd rather be at home than anywhere else in the world. I hate leaving. I get cranky when I got to leave. Sometimes I have to apologize to Patty because I'm kind of wound up before I got to go on the road, especially if it's a long road trip. And it's not because I don't want to be out there. It's because I don't want to leave. But when I get out there, what happens every single time I go on the road, it doesn't matter where I'm going, and I get to hang out with you guys, I meet somebody and something happens, and it's just magical. And so I leave, I'm kind of cranky, I come home, Patty goes, how was it? And I always say, it was incredible. It was absolutely, this person that I met, this story that I heard, this servant that I got to cross paths with. I used to think I knew why I was traveling. This is kind of funny. I would tell Patty, she'd go, well, why are you going to Montana? Well, I have a hearing and I've got to testify at this hearing. And after a while I realized I have no idea why I'm traveling. And because every time I went out, I thought I'm going for a hearing, and then I would cross paths with somebody and I'd think, this completely changed my life. I heard this story, I met this person, I'm going to introduce them to somebody else. One of the things that God's given me is the ability to connect people. I know so many people now, it's almost invariable. I meet somebody and they say, I'm trying to do this thing. And I say, oh, you need to talk to Rick Green, or you need to talk to Kevin Roberts. And so these things happen that are just amazing when I'm on the road. And from my perspective, it's always God ordained. They're just incredible. I know in the moment when it's happening. I meet somebody and I'll often say to somebody, oh, now I know why God sent me to Montana, right? Because I was supposed to meet you. And so my greatest privilege is being on the road and hanging out with all of you guys. As I'm walking around here, we've now been doing this 12 years as of this August. So many of you in this audience I actually know. I don't know what the percentage is, but it's pretty high. And I walk through and people say hello to me and I'm like, I know who you are. I know your state. I remember meeting you. I might not remember the exact circumstance. People often say to me, I'm sure you don't remember. Trust me, I remember you. I may not remember your name or the exact circumstance, but I remember meeting you. You had an impact on me. And so what I hope that you will do is to take that yourself and take that to heart. We're about to take a break. And during that break, this is free time. And this is time that you requested, right? We're doing this not because we didn't have a bunch more stuff we could program. We could program a week of stuff. But you guys said the most important thing to you guys was not to have me up here. It wasn't to listen to Rick Santorum, which we're going to do next, which is the highlight. But the reason that you come to these things is to hang out with each other. So after this next session, after Rick talks, we're going to let you guys go out and hang out together before you guys do dinner. But next I'm going to introduce one of my closest friends in the world. And you guys know Rick as a senator, you know him as an incredible speaker, as a motivational guy, all the stuff that you see on stage. Thank God a lot of you have gotten to know him in person in the States, right? He's been in a lot of your states, and when he comes to your states, the one thing I know about Rick is he's just a regular guy, and he hangs out with you, and he does all the stuff that I just talked about that I love doing, and he meets you, and he gets to know you, and he collects your stories. I know it makes Rick uncomfortable when I say this stuff, and I'm not saying it to do that. I'm saying it because it has to be said. My favorite thing to say about Rick Santorum is there are many great people in the world who accomplish great things. There are plenty of people who've run for president. There have been over 1,500, 1,600 senators in the history of America. Those are great accomplishments. To run for president, not a lot of people do that. That's kind of rarefied air. There are not many people that you will meet in your lifetime that are both great and good. Often goodness does not come with greatness. People can accomplish great things, amazing things, do things in the world that change the world, but they're not necessarily good men or women at heart. Like people that you would just love because you know the goodness in their heart. Rick Santorum is that man. He is a great man and a good man and one of my closest friends. It's an honor to introduce Rick Santorum.
Once more they begin to run it, go down the Mississippi to the Gulf of Mexico.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks, Mark. I don't know if I should bless all of you now or something like that. Or I don't know what the thing to say after that. I feel like I should have a halo based on what he said, but I don't. Not even close. I'm going to talk about what I just heard because appreciate the kind remarks from my friend Kevin Roberts, and he has been a friend for a long time. I first met Kevin when he was the headmaster of a little Catholic school in Lafayette, Louisiana. And he called and asked if I would come down and do a fundraiser for that little school. And I thought, why is this guy from Lafayette, Louisiana calling me to go do a fundraiser for a little startup school, Catholic school? And then I met Kevin and his incredible wife and the kids, and I thought, wow, this guy is special. What's he doing here? What's he doing this? And it turned out that he wasn't doing it very long. Everywhere he's gone, he's had a huge impact on the institution. And I use that word institution, I'll come back to it. He's had a huge impact on the institution that he governed and he led. And you heard Mark and Kevin talk about his leadership and his leadership style. But he was driven, and he talked about Charlie. I'm going to talk about Charlie. He was driven by something that, I'll just be honest, we don't see or haven't seen much from conservative leaders in the past. When I say in the past, in my generation. Kevin is intentionally outwardly talking about his faith and how it guides him. He talks about, as Charlie, I'm sure you've all seen videos of Charlie, how just out there in the open about the role that God, Jesus Christ, the Christian faith plays in their lives as men, as fathers, as husbands, and as leaders, as people involved in the public square. I can go back, think of the time that the conservative movement was birthed back in the 60s and 70s. And the first real strong conservative leader, Ronald Reagan. If you just go through the conservative leadership, Reagan was a great man, and he did reference faith, but they were not like Kevin. They were not like Mark. They were not like Charlie. And that may say, well, it was a different time. And I think that's true. It was a different time. We tended to all agree on the basics. People said Democrats and Republicans just get along back then. Well, that's because Democrats and Republicans generally agreed with each other on sort of the essential thing. Like they knew what a woman was. They knew what marriage was. They knew what life was. They knew what murder was. They knew good and they knew evil. And so you could sort of gloss over it. You go back and read presidential speeches all the way back to George Washington, and you will see talk of the Almighty. You will see talk of God. It was part of the vernacular of the public square. And Reagan and others in the early conservative movement began to bring that back, but in much softer tones. And if you look at what's happened during this time when we have been losing, Kevin said we're going to look back. We've been losing. Oh, yeah, we win the presidency and we win Congress and we win some state legislatures, but we're losing the culture. We're losing. We're losing the American experiment in ordered liberty and republicanism, not small r, not big R, but small r. We all feel it and felt it slipping away. And now, and I think Kevin and Mark, Charlie, are showing a little different brand of leadership that we desperately need. I'm a big fan of Donald Trump. I think he's doing a great job. He is the disruptor, right? And I use the analogy of Trump, that Trump, if he were a figure in the Bible, Trump would be Moses. Moses was the great disruptor, right? He took on the Pharaoh, the fake news, and in a sense parted the seas, trying to get us out of this corrupt culture and society and government that has been built around us and trying to move us into the promised land. But ladies and gentlemen, Moses never got to the promised land. We need leaders who have a heart for God, who love him first and foremost, and who love his word and what he teaches us to be in our own lives. I look at Mark Meckler, I look at Charlie Kirk, I look at Kevin Roberts, and I see lovers of God's truth and lover, of course, of God, and not afraid to say it out loud, not afraid to witness. I'm going to take issue with Kevin on one thing. He mentioned how we're going to take tanks and things like that. That's one approach, and I don't mean he said that. I mean, he meant go after them and defeat them. How about convert them? Charlie Kirk wasn't out there to defeat them. He was out there to convert them. Why did he do that? Because he knew he had the truth. He had the truth. The truth is a beautiful thing. Why? Because God created it. It's a beautiful thing. But we have been taught for generations that ugly things are beautiful, that evil things are good. Our mind and our values have been so corrupted that we can't even see good for good unless people get up and boldly proclaim it, like the three men I'm just talking about. You are blessed. You're here at a time when the struggle of good and evil, and I don't mean that people on the other side are evil. I'm not going there. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that people are lost. People have been lied to. The reason Charlie's been so effective, and by the way, will continue to be effective going forward, because his voice is not going away. I will admit, I've known Charlie since he first got involved. When he was 18, 19 years old, I met Charlie. And he's not the same Charlie that I met at the end. He was not. He radically transformed into a radical lover of Jesus Christ and of this country and of the belief that our country could, in fact, be good again. If we did just the basics, as Kevin talked about, the basics, as Heritage is now committed to, the basic, what's that? Love God, love your spouse, love your children, and serve. The basics. When I say serve, I don't mean you have to be president or governor or state legislator. Serve. That's what we teach here at COS. We teach servant leadership. But the first servant is to serve him and not be afraid to witness for him. I wrote a book 20 years ago in response to Hillary Clinton's book, It Takes a Village. And ladies and gentlemen, the village is the government. And I wrote a book called It Takes a Family. Because I believe that the basic unit of society is not the individuals, which the left believes, and unfortunately the libertarian right believes, but the basic unit of society, of every good and decent society, is a man and woman married, having children, and raising those children in truth. And that if we are not a movement that supports that, we are going to die. If we are not a movement that educates our children and protects our children from the rot of our schools and our culture, they are going to die. We have a job to do. Charlie Kirk called us to that job, and I'll be honest with you, I didn't even hear it. I knew Charlie way back when, and Charlie and I actually had some disagreements about how he was running Turning Point back then, because he was running it more of a libertarian type of organization that was focused almost solely on money and the economy and, socialism. His big theme was socialism sucks. And I said, Charlie, you're missing something. You're missing what's really important. If conservatives want to succeed, you've got to focus on the important things that transform societies. You want to transform societies, and Charlie said this so well, and I didn't even know. I'd never seen Charlie's college things that he was doing. I never paid attention to it, I admit, until after he died, and then I looked at them and I said, oh my gosh, no wonder he's having such an impact. No wonder. He's telling the truth. He's telling these kids who have been lied to, who are continuing to be lied to, who've been abandoned by their parents, to the educational system and in the culture and these treacherous things. Get behind me, Satan. But each of you can be that leader to your spouse, to your children, to your neighbors, to the people at church, to your pastor, to encourage them. This is a moment. I know people have referenced the fact that Charlie was prophetic in calling his organization Turning Point. This is a turning point. And the beautiful thing about this organization, we're an organization designed to try to restore the republic, to restore federalism, to restore a system that works for America, that had worked for 200 years and is now falling into disrepair and is descending. And we are organized to try to repair that. And my first message is repair you and the things you love first. Repair that. And then go on and serve. And I don't think there's any more important area of service that you can do for your country than this project. Because, and I'm going to disagree with the discussion about electing congressmen and all that kind of stuff. That can be great. You can elect all the congressmen you want. Congress, I was there. I served 4 years in Congress. I've served 12 years in the Senate. Whoever hits the majority in Congress can do whatever they want, and they always have. It's a majoritarian party, and they, by and large, find a way to pass whatever they want. The key is the Senate. And the problem with the Senate is the founders didn't want the federal government to be big, so they designed the Senate to stop everything from happening in Washington. They were very effective. They were so effective that they killed it. Sound familiar? If you're really effective against the left, they kill it. And they tried to kill the United States Senate. The Senate was a body up until 1917 that in order to get a vote on the floor of the United States Senate, every senator had to agree to vote. You know how big the federal government was in 1917? This big. This big. Why? Because the founders wanted it to be that big. They wanted the power in mothers and fathers and churches and communities. And yes, businesses and localities. They wanted government to be powerful closest to you so you could affect it and shape it and impact it. And guess what happened? The Constitution changed. The 17th Amendment, the Constitution changed, and with that, the country changed. So when people say, don't mess with the Constitution, say the progressive already put a bullet in the Constitution. And they took out the mechanism to protect you from Washington. Exactly what they wanted to do. And they did it under the guise of, oh, well, the people should elect their members, and it's not democratic. We are not a democracy. And of course, the left will cut it off there, and I will say we are a republic. Yes, we have democratic elections, but we are not a democracy. We're not cantons in Switzerland. We'd all come out and vote for whatever the town wants. We are a republic. We separate the passions of the populace from the governing of the country as a protection for the people from mob rule. Yes, the House can do whatever it wants. It's a majoritarian body. The Senate cannot. And so when I hear people say, well, we'll fix it in Washington.
That's an oxymoron.
There's only 3 times in the history of our country where there's been dramatic change in Washington, D.C. since 1917. And there was none before 1917. 3 times. You know what those 3 times were? 3 times, one party had a filibuster-proof majority in the United States Senate. 3 times. The 3 times, the New Deal, the Great Society, and Obamacare. The 3 great expansions of power in Washington, D.C. all occurred when mob rule, if you will, the majoritarian could do what they wanted. And people complained to me when I was a senator, and they complain now, well, Republicans just aren't getting anything done. Well, that's because they're not supposed to, unless they have a supermajority. So you have 2 options. 1, elect a supermajority of the United States senators, and I'm all for that. Let's get a majority of Republican United States senators, and of course we'll have 3 or 4 who will cut us in anyway, and we won't win anyway, but nevertheless, we should try. The other option is to restore federalism and get the power out of Washington and back into the hands of the people of this country through a convention of states. You want reform, it's going to happen first in your heart, second in your marriage, third with your children, fourth with your church, your community, and then your country. You are leaders at a time when our country desperately needs leaders. People always say to me, aren't you depressed? You're here at a time when evil is winning. And it is. And I said, don't you want to be here at a time when God needs saints? You really want to live at a time when all you had to do is sort of kick back and everything was just great and life was going on? Wouldn't that be great? Ladies and gentlemen, Charlie Kirk is in heaven. You know why I know that? Because he is a martyr for his faith. There's a saying in the Catholic Church that the blood of the martyrs are the seeds of the church. There is no greater gift you can give our Lord than your life for him. Charlie gave that. Don't be afraid of that. Don't be afraid of that. Don't let anybody convince you to be afraid of that. Don't be afraid of criticism. Don't be afraid of vitriol. Don't be afraid of being shamed. Don't be afraid of what they will do to you. You know, I was in Pennsylvania where I served as a senator, and it's pretty much a Protestant and Catholic state. We didn't have a whole lot of evangelicals when I was first running for the Senate. I went to Iowa and I campaigned for president. There were evangelicals everywhere. And I remember getting up at a Baptist church and someone said to me, said, Senator, and the question answered, what's your verse? I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, what's your Bible verse that you live by? All of them? So I finished and I thought, gosh, I got to get a verse. If I'm going to be here. And then immediately, I mean, it's one of these things that you may have experienced this. I felt like God was going to damn me at that very moment, that the only reason I would get a verse is to win votes, right? And I immediately said, please forgive me, God, I will never have a verse. Okay? Because I don't want to ever have a verse to be claimed that I was somehow doing it to win votes. And so I never had a verse. Now that I'm out of politics, I was reading the Bible a few years ago, and I found a verse. And I'm not trying to win your vote. And here's my verse. Remember, if they hate you, they hated me first. They will hate you and persecute you because of me. Do not be afraid of being hated. Do not be afraid of standing for the truth boldly and taking a bullet for it. Charlie took an actual bullet. You may take ones that actually hurt more, that you have to live with them and you have to suffer through them. But be not afraid. There is rich reward for you. And more importantly, if you do that, if you fight for these truths, you will redeem this country and leave your children and grandchildren to a world of hope and love. God bless you. Oh, I am? Okay. You moving this? You got it?
Oh, that was so good. He doesn't talk like that when we're just hanging out together. I'm not sure I could take that much of that.
Oh, by the way, I got my heritage tie on for Kevin.
Pretty impressive, huh?
For Kevin, my heritage tie.
Man, so many things came to mind as you were talking. I want to start with something light, which is...
Yeah, that's me. I'm pretty light.
Yeah, you are. I hang out with you. You are light. You and I both had a chance to hang out with Charlie when he was young. And I had a chance, my primary interaction with Charlie really was hunting with him. And I know you've been on a bunch of hunts with him. And so you've known him since he was 18 or 19 years old. Do you have anything you can remember about Charlie? Like, he was a kid and he was awkward and...
I remember, some of you may know Leroy Mitchell. Leroy is the guy who started Cinemark. Those of you who have Cinemark theaters. Yep. And Leroy is a supporter of mine when I ran for president in 2012. And it was probably might have been 2012 or early 2013. He called me and he knew I was in Dallas. He was in Dallas. He knew I was in Dallas and he called me and said, hey, I've got this young kid who's coming to see me. I'd like you to meet him and to listen to his presentation and give me an idea because he wants a major investment. I thought, okay. And so I sat down. It was Charlie Kirk. And I remember listening to him and thinking, guy's obviously very smart, but what hubris. I mean, he was 18 or 19 years old. He was a high school graduate, and he had this vision. And He was a good-looking kid, very articulate for 18, but he had a plan. He had a vision. And I remember, he made the presentation, got up and left, and I talked to him. I said, I knew that Foster Freeze had given him some money already. And I said, I don't know. I said, I don't know whether Turning Point or whatever, I don't even know what it was called back then, but I don't know if he's going to be, that organization would be successful, but I thought that was a pretty good kid to invest in. And I said, we'll see. He had a lot of hubris, a ton of hubris. But he was able to back it up. And to me, the most important thing about Charlie is the most important thing about all of us is life is a journey, and every day is a chance to learn and improve. And I think Charlie was committed to that. He was committed. If you look at the way he did his interviews, and the knowledge that he accumulated to be able to respond to these questions that he knew he was going to get, because when you're around the left and that culture, the questions that are coming. There's nothing new under the sun there. They've been taught the same thing. It's just that they're little robots. But what Charlie did is he went just deeper. And I think in the process of him going deeper to deal with the mess that is college campuses this day and the woke ideology, the deeper he got into the truth, he found the source of the truth. And that arc between the Charlie Kirk that I knew and I saw early on and the Charlie Kirk at the end, who was a disciple of Jesus Christ and an evangelist on college campuses. That's what he was. And I didn't recognize him. He was a new person in my mind. And I didn't know that until after he died, until I started looking at all the video. And so, and if it would have been the Charlie of the early years, no one would be talking about Charlie today. But it was the Charlie who boldly proclaimed and boldly lived the truth. And so I would say to all of you, first and foremost, do the homework. Okay? Do the homework. He did the homework. He wasn't great at what he did because he just was naturally given that talent. Sure, he had natural talent. Of course he did. But he did the homework. And I think all of us need to think long and hard about whether, if we were in that situation to confront you know who, could we stand up and do we know here the truth and why we believe what we believe? And I really think that's part of, you want to transform the world, then you have to witness, and you can't be beat by the other side because you have the truth and they don't, so you shouldn't lose.
Well, that was the light one.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up, there's one more person I want to talk about who is missing, and that's Dr. Tom Coburn, our dear friend. And sitting here with you kind of reminds me of a time with him, which was, we knew, this is before you were with COS, we knew we were going to lose him. He and I sat in chairs like this on stage in Williamsburg, and I interviewed him, and yeah, it wasn't quite a moment. And I asked Tom a question on stage, sitting just like this, and I'm going to tell you the story, but then I just want you to comment on Tom, if you would, which is I asked him, why do you do what you do? But I framed it up in a way that he really hated, which is, he was a great man, and he was a good man, like you. And most people didn't understand how bad he suffered. That man suffered for a lot of years. He had his first bout of cancer when he was 38 years old, lived to 71, so literally half of his life he was in one stage or another in remission, suffering from cancer. 4 times he went around in cancer and ultimately took his life. And we were sitting on stage, and I said to Tom, look, everybody knows your sort of fairy tale life. And he really did. Like, he had this incredible life. He was very wealthy, pretty young, built a company with his dad, sold it, had his own private jet, flew himself around the world, goes back to school, becomes a OBGYN, delivers 4,000 babies. As if that's not enough, he marries Miss Oklahoma. Like, it's pretty incredible. Becomes a senator, he's a well-known senator. He's not just a senator. And then I got to watch him in the last 5 years and see how he suffered. And he never stopped. Like, he would not stop. I tried to stop him. Patty tried to stop. We would say things like, you know what, Tom, you don't have to travel so much. And he would say, don't tell me what to do, literally. And he said to Patty one time, I'm going to die with my boots on, so stop trying to stop me. And so we sat here and I said, Tom, everybody knows the fairy tale. They don't know how much you suffered. I watched him, Rick, where we'd go to New York and we would do a media tour, and I'd pick him up from his hotel room in the morning. I'd walk with him, and he would literally be sweating and grunting because he was in so much pain. He had bone cancer in the end that had metastasized into both his legs. And we'd walk into a studio, and he would just boom. And it was Tom Coburn. It was the old Tom Coburn. And we'd walk out, and he was in so much pain he could barely walk. And I'd try to call a cab for us, and he'd yell at me about calling a cab. We'd go back to the hotel. I'd put him in his hotel room. He'd wake me when we need to go again. And I would be worried I was going to knock on the door, and he wouldn't answer. It was that bad. And he just kept going. So I didn't tell all that detail, but I told that story, and I said, why do you keep doing, why do you keep fighting? At your point in life, most people would be home with their grandkids, just settling in. You have a great family. And he looked at me like I was just the biggest idiot in the world. Sometimes that suits, so it's okay. But he said, what else would I do? Literally, that was his whole answer. What else would I do? So I think he was one of the most extraordinary men I've ever had the privilege to be with in my life. You served with him in the Senate. I know you had a lot of experience with him. What do you recall about Tom?
He was irascible and ornery.
Yeah.
That's what I remember.
That's absolutely true.
He was he was really he was one of these guys who was just committed to what his principles dictated, and there was just no wavering him at all. And which is great, but in a Congress, it also can be very, very troubling.
Yeah.
But luckily, 99% of the time, he was right? At least he was right in my mind. And so we didn't have very many run-ins. We really didn't. But he was, as a member who was in leadership, he was always, always making sure that we towed the line on principle. So my experience with him was someone who just had a very strong sense of right and wrong, good and evil, and the role that government was supposed to play in people's lives, and he didn't vary from that. And I think it was, suffering's a terrible thing, and obviously going through what he went through, where you're probably not going to live a long life. It also brings you to a place in your life where you say, well, I've only got so much time, right? I think all of us sort of live our lives thinking, well, we're going to get up tomorrow. Well, maybe someone won't. And I think he was always the understanding that he may not be getting up tomorrow. And so he was just pedal to the metal, whatever it took. And he had a vision, or he received some calling from the Lord, and he was going to follow that through. And I just encourage all of you to think about that. And that doesn't mean, well, you have to go out and run for office. It may be, that you need to help take care of your grandchildren, whatever it is. I don't know what it is. But I always tell people, when I get up and I give speeches and try to motivate people to get involved, I have a lot of people come up to me and say, well, what should I do? And I look at that, I don't know. I said, how do I know? I said, you need to talk to the big guy, and you need to get in real humility and just say, Lord, I'm in. What's your will? What do you want from me? What is your call for me in my life? And you have to do it with real humility. And because it may not be what you want. But I always say this, God's will is perfect. God's perfect will. Why is it perfect? Because he loves you more than anybody in this world, more than you love yourself. Why? Because he's God, and he can love more than any of us. So he loves you. Why do you worry about what his will for you is? Because he loves you so much, he wants one thing. He wants to love you forever in heaven. That's why he created you. He created you to be with him in heaven. And his will is what will get you there. It may not be happy. It may not be easy. It may be suffering. In fact, I guarantee you it will be suffering. But it's his will because he loves you. Be not afraid.
Love you, brother.
You want this thing? You can.